Hey, welcome to another video from our Fear No Fix series on our YouTube channel, on the BlueDriver YouTube channel. Today, on this 2005 Chevy Silverado 5.3 liter engine, we are going to replace the knock sensor. Now, this is a very long repair, which means you can save a ton of money. If with your BlueDriver you have pulled a P0332 or a P0327, most commonly P0332 is what you're going to read. This is, by the way, the second most common repair. And when that code does come up, over 95% of the time, it is the knock sensor. Chris.
This is a long one. You're probably looking at the length of the video right now going, I don't know about this. You might skip ahead. You're going to see a lot of weird looking stuff. We're going to disconnect coolant lines, fuel lines. The whole intake manifold has to come out. It seems like a lot of work. It seems pretty intimidating. It's not actually that bad. Just go step by step. Take an afternoon to do it, and you'll be fine. If you have any other vehicle with a 5.3 liter V8, say a Yukon, Suburban, anything like that, it should be pretty much the exact same repair, so that should apply as well.
There's 44 steps, but it's 2.5 hours in the book. You can figure out how much you can save. So if you like this video, if it helped you out, subscribe to our channel, like the video, help other people find it. And when you're all done, mail half your savings to Chris. The tools you'll need for the knock sensor replacement are an 8, 10, and 22 millimeter socket, a ratchet, a flathead screwdriver, long and short 3/8 inch extensions, vice grips, hose clamp pliers, and a 1/4 or 3/8 inch torque wrench. It's also helpful to have rags and a fuel line release tool.
We need to pull the intake manifold to get to the knock sensor. To pull the intake manifold, we have to disconnect the fuel line, which is full of pressurized gas right now. So before we get started, we're going to start the truck, pull the fuel pump relay, and let the engine stall to drop the fuel pressure to minimize the amount of fuel we spill all over the place once we disconnect the line.
So this isn't part of the repair, but you can see we put our fuel pressure tester in line, and we already have 50 psi of fuel pressure without the truck even running.
The fuel pump relay is in the main fuse and relay box on the driver's side of the engine bay, right here. Pull the top off, and then inside you'll see a diagram showing the layout of all the fuses and the relays. The fuel pump on this one is right here, which corresponds to this relay right here. So we'll just pull it out and put it aside. So there might be a little bit of fuel pressure left in the system. On this truck, it's just a Schrader valve, kind of like on your tires. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna take a pick or a screwdriver or something. I'm gonna take a rag, I'm gonna put the rag underneath it, and I'm just gonna press in on the pin and just let that little bit of gas come out and bleed off the pressure. And this is just because it's a little more well controlled, so when we disconnect the fuel line in a couple of minutes, it's not going to go all over the place. Loosen this 8mm bolt right here, and then we'll remove the engine cover. Lift up and pull out. Now we need to remove the outlet ducting from the air box to the throttle body. We start by loosening these two hose clamps, one here, and then the second one is over here. And both are an 8mm bolt. There's a clip on the bottom of the outlet ducting that holds on the radiator hose and the coolant line for the throttle body. The throttle body coolant line just pulls out. Then you can use a screwdriver or a flat-bladed tool, insert it into the clip up here, remove the radiator hose, and then you can take the whole outlet ducting out and we'll put it aside. On this step, we're going to have to remove the coolant line that runs through the throttle body. It comes in on the left here. There's a hose clamp, and then there's an outlet hose on the right with another hose clamp. So if you want, you can basically just put down a rag and pull them off. You're going to lose half a cup of coolant. Alternately, you can use some of those fancy pliers that are used for pinching off hoses to stop them. What I'm going to do, I'm going to use vice grips, and I'm going to put a rag in between the teeth just so we don't have bare metal crushing down, so we're not going to tear the hose.
How many miles does this truck have on it, Chris?
Miles. 250,000 kilometers. Sorry, I'm Canadian. Now, we're going to remove the 2 hose clamps. You can do this with needle nose pliers, any sort of pliers, or if you want to be fancy, you can shell out the $15 and get a pair of hose clamp pliers, which might make your life a lot easier, but you don't need them.
I think we've done some other repairs where you wish you had that tool.
I was told I wasn't allowed to do any more hoses without one. So I loosened one hose clamp, slid it over. The second one is down here. These things are worth every cent. Put down a rag to catch any coolant that spills, and then pull off the coolant lines. Not too much. This one here is a little bit trickier. And there we go. Pull out on this gray clip, then down on the tab, and disconnect the throttle body. Next, we'll remove this hose by pulling out.
While we have the top of the engine clear, we are doing another video on changing the throttle body on this 5.3 liter engine. That's the subject of another video on our YouTube channel. Just like that, brand new throttle body. If you really want to see it in slow-mo, we have a whole video for that process on our YouTube channel.
We're going to remove this plastic cover on the back of the intake now. It's 3 10mm bolts. The one in the back is a little hard to get to, so you might need a wrench for that one. Now we want to remove any debris that might be around the intake manifold. This is to make sure that it can't fall in once we get the intake off. For this, compressed air is really useful. If you have access to a compressor, you can use that, or you can go down to any store and pick up a can of compressed air for blowing out your computer. You want to make sure your safety glasses are on for this one, just so nothing blows back and hits you in the eye. And then we're just going to blow some air right around where the intake manifold meets the block. Now we're going to unplug each fuel injector. There are 8 connectors. Each one's the same design. They all have a gray plastic clip here. You pry that back, then pull up on it. It comes out. Then there's a plastic tab right here. You pinch that. Pinch it hard. Sometimes it can be a little bit stubborn. And pull up. And then you want to put the plastic clip in right away, or you're guaranteed to lose it. Now we'll remove the other 7 injector plugs. Now we're going to unbolt the intake manifold. It's held down with 10 8mm bolts, 5 per side. The bolts are 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 5 back here is near the firewall. 6, 7, 8, 9, and then number 10 back near the firewall again. This last bolt at the back is a little hard to get to. You might need to experiment with a couple of different sizes of extensions and deep versus shallow sockets. Here's what's working for me. There's one bolt hidden down here, just behind this, right around here. It's hard to see and it's easy to forget. Now, this is going to sound obvious and maybe kind of stupid, but count the bolts you have. Last time I did this, I only took 9 out, and then I spent a half hour trying to figure out why the intake wouldn't come off. Unclip the map sensor at the back of the intake. Unhook the 2 clips here and here. Unplug the alternator. Unclip and remove the evap line. and then unplug the connector. Remove this 10mm nut right here. Move the wiring harness aside. Now we're going to remove the vacuum line from the brake booster. It runs from right here to the back of the intake. You can remove either one, but this hose clamp here is a lot easier to reach. Unplug the PCV line. Unplug the knock sensor. And then unclip the other side of the connector from the intake by pulling up in this metal tab. Now we're going to disconnect the fuel line. First, put down a rag to catch any gas that might drip out. Now we're going to use our fuel line quick release tool. Some people will use something like a piece of plastic to push up inside the collar to push the tabs in. This will work, but these tools are only about $10 and they make the job a lot easier. Place the tool on the fuel line, close it, slide it under the collar to push in the locking tabs, then grab the fuel line, twist a little bit and pull back, and it'll pop right off. And watch for a little bit of gas that's going to spill out. Last step before removing the intake, we'll take the evap line, feed it back under the fuel line so it doesn't get caught up. And then we'll push it aside, out of the way. Now we're ready to remove the intake. There's a little bit more room in here than there is in my Project Miata. Watch out for coolant and gas, which might spill. Now we're going to take some rags and we're going to put them down in the intake ports here just to make sure that none of these leaves or needles or anything get in there. And now we're ready to take out the knock sensor. The two knock sensors are right here and here under the rubber plugs. To access them, just pull up and then unclip the connector. Now that we have access to the knock sensor, we'll remove it with a 22mm socket.
And all this hauling the top half of the engine off for this.
Just to get to that.
So it kind of goes without saying, you're probably going to want to change both of these. You pull this code, it's either one of these sensors has gone bad.
And with this amount of work, I'm not doing this again.
It's disappointing that where this is on this truck, most vehicles have these much more accessible. To take the intake off is unusual.
We're going to torque to 15 foot-pounds. Plug in the sensor, and then hold on to the wire up here, slide the plug down, and there we go. Now it's time to reinstall the intake. We're going to remove these rags. Before we do, just look for any debris that might fall down. Once the rags are out, be really careful not to drop anything. Now we'll clean up the mating surface for the gaskets on the heads.
All right, Chris, here you go. What about these gaskets? We're not replacing them today.
No, officially you're supposed to. These are a pretty expensive part. They're rubber. They should be reusable. Personally, I wouldn't, but ultimately that's up to you. First step of reassembly, we're going to bolt up the intake manifold. We'll start up by threading in all 10 bolts just finger tight. Before we thread them in, we're going to apply just a little bit of Loctite 242. That's blue medium strength. Might be a little much there. For now, I'm just doing these finger tight. When it comes time to torque them up, there's a two-stage process, and they have to be done in a specific order. We'll show you that order now in a couple seconds, and then also we'll put a link below that'll give you a diagram you can use to follow when you're doing this yourself. Now we're going to torque down the intake. This is a two-stage procedure. We're going to go in the order shown on screen, and we're going to go on the first round, everything's going to be 44 inch-pounds. The second round is going to be 89 inch-pounds. You're probably going to notice that I'm using a 3/8 inch torque wrench here. This is too big for these torques. Ideally, you want a 1/4 inch for this. So we're going to do the first round, 44 inch-pounds, using the order shown. Second pass, same order, but 89 inch-pounds this time. All right, let's do it. Evap line. PCV hose. Brake booster. Evap connector. Alternator connector. Now we'll put the wiring harness back. And the 10mm nut. Clip on the wiring harness. And the knock sensor connector. Connector for the map sensor. Now we plug in the injectors. On the driver's side, this tab points to the back of the truck. On the passenger side, the tabs face forward. And now for this cover, 3 10mm bolts. Push on the fuel line and it clicks in place. And replace the metal clip. Hook up this hose behind the throttle body. And plug in the throttle body connector. Push down to the gray tab. Throttle body coolant line. Now it's unlikely to be a problem, but since you might spill a little bit of coolant on this step, you should check your coolant after and top it up as necessary. Now our outlet ducting. We're gonna clip on the rad hose. And we're also gonna clip in the throttle body coolant line. Install the ducting on the throttle body. And on the mass airflow sensor. Tighten your hose clamps. Finally, the engine cover. And we're finally done.
All right, that's it. This thing is buttoned up. We're ready to get the car back out on the road. Whenever you have a check engine light on, use your BlueDriver to reset the check engine light, but you're still not ready to take an emission test. You are going to need to complete a drive cycle to reset your monitors. That takes about 40 to 45 minutes of driving. Before you take an emission test, do your smog check function on your BlueDriver. Chris?
It's a long one, but it's not hard. And by doing it yourself, you're going to save a ton of money.
A ton of money indeed. This is 2.5 hours in the OEM book that it takes, so you know how much money you're going to be saving. It might have taken you an afternoon, but well worth it. There's 44 steps. Nothing here to be afraid of. This should be easy as you just saw. And if you like the video, please like it on YouTube and subscribe to our channel. We got new stuff coming all the time. And until next time, fear no fix.